So last night, Virginia had its primary elections for the state Senate and House of Delegates races, as well as a couple of other local positions, Commonwealth's attorneys, etc. And these races are important because, of course, they determine the nominees for who's going to be running in the general election. And I think there's key takeaways on both sides of the equation. Of course, on the Democratic side, you had moderates and centrists sort of pushed out of the party in favor of more progressive candidates. So the Democratic Party of Virginia really consolidating around a more progressive ideology. Whereas on the Republican side, you've actually seen quite the opposite. You've seen Republicans sort of ousting these more MAGA conspiratorial type candidates in favor of Youngkin type conservatives. And I think that's really going to be the referendum in November in Virginia, which is whether or not this progressive brand of the Democratic Party will be able to win, and conversely, whether or not the Youngkin brand of the GOP can bring Republicans back to full power in the state. So we're going to talk about all these things as well as the general election in just a second. But first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So on the Democratic side, like I said, you saw moderates and centrists basically kicked out of the party in these primaries. Chap Peterson of the 37th district of the state Senate was very much sort of the only Democrat that actually bucked the party line, really. He is the reason why school children in Virginia don't have to wear masks anymore, at least mandated by the state, and those sorts of COVID restrictions. He actually voted with the Republicans in favor of that. And as such, of course, he was punished by the Democratic base. He was defeated in the primary by about 8 points with 95% reporting. I'm sure it's probably fully right now, but New York Times probably hasn't updated it as of yet. But nonetheless, Chap Peterson has lost his primary. Again, very much a centrist, middle-of-the-road Democrat. Again, mostly voted party line with Democrats, but every now and then he would side with the Republicans. And of course, this is really just the Democratic base consolidating its coalition around a more center-left and even progressive ideology. Cray Deeds, who used to be more of a moderate state senator, not so much anymore, and by moderate I mean talking about bucking the party line, he almost lost his primary against another Democrat, although he actually won very narrowly. Not too sure if that Democrat was more progressive or not. Again, Cray Deeds used to be more moderate. In the past, he recently, a couple of years ago, voted against the assault weapons ban that Governor Northam tried to pass in Virginia. So he does still have a bit of a moderate tinge, but overall, he still tends to vote, of course, party line Democrat. He narrowly held on in his primary, beating his opponent 51-49. And on the Republican side, you saw a similar thing happen in the state Senate. Of course, Amanda Chase, who was dubbed the Trump in heels, ran for governor back in 2021, was projected to win the primary if Virginia Republicans actually did have a primary. They opted instead to do a convention-style system, which of course saw her lose and saw Glenn Youngkin prevail as the Republican nominee. And in hindsight, of course, that was certainly the right move because Amanda Chase would have lost to Terry McAuliffe by a pretty sizable amount. Again, you can really infer that, especially given the fact that Donald Trump had the worst showing for a Republican in the state of Virginia since 1944 in terms of course, the overall margin that he lost by. He lost by 10.1%. You haven't seen a Republican do this bad since the 1940s. So, of course, Amanda Chase emulating these policies and in some cases even being more fringe than Donald Trump to your average voter would have been a total disaster for the Virginia GOP. But they chose the winning path. They chose Glenn Youngkin. They chose somebody who could thread the needle between the MAGA element of the base, the more economic conservatives, the more just never Trump Republicans. And ultimately, he was able to beat Terry McAuliffe by about 2 points back in 2021. Again, just a year after Republicans had the worst showing in Virginia since 1944. So it really does tell you something about the Youngkin brand of the GOP. It is viable. Now, in 2022, of course, it fell a little bit short. Jen Kiggans won in the 2nd district, but of course, you had the 7th district where Yesli Vega lost. And of course, you had Hung Kao lose in the 10th. Now, the 10th really wasn't even supposed to be competitive, so the fact that Hung Kao got within sort of the mid to single digits was pretty impressive. But the 7th district and the 2nd district should have either flipped or should have been larger margins than they were. But of course, you might be able to chalk that up less to Youngkin and more so just the national backlash to the overturning of Roe and some of these more Trumpian candidates around the country. I'd say in Virginia particularly, it was probably more of the Roe v. Wade thing because you really didn't have many of these Trumpian candidates. A lot of them were weeded out in the convention style system, which is one of the reasons why Virginia Republicans have been so successful since Youngkin, is because they've been able to weed out these more suburban toxic Republicans and get Republicans who are still conservatives, who still vote Republican, but just have much better optics for the suburbs that Republicans actually need to win. Now, there's another primary where you saw this happen. Tara Durant, who flipped a House of Delegates seat back in 2021 very narrowly in the Stafford, Spotsylvania area, which is pretty much right around here. It's a lean red area. It's a bit of a swingy area now. Stafford County went blue, of course, in 2020, but Spotsylvania is still pretty red. So she represents sort of that district and maybe potentially a part of Prince William County, not 100% sure. But nonetheless, she's currently running in the 27th State Senate District, which Glenn Youngkin won by over 8 points. So it's very likely that, of course, she's going to go on to the State Senate with these results. But she was in the House of Delegates for just one term. She decided to run for State Senate. And her opponent, Matt Strickland, was very much in that MAGA Trump-only faction of the GOP. He was even trashing Glenn Youngkin at a number of his events. So, of course, Tara Durant defeated him pretty easily, and this goes to show you that Youngkin does have tremendous sway over the Virginia GOP. And it's easy to see why. He was the first Republican to win statewide in Virginia in about 12 years. So Republican voters see that, and they realize that Youngkin's candidates not only will support Youngkin's conservative agenda, but they're actually going to be able to win in Virginia because, again, Virginia's a blue state. Again, Virginia didn't turn blue just because of Trump. Trump was certainly a factor in how blue Virginia got, but Virginia voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012 and voted for Terry McAuliffe in 2013. So this wasn't just a Trump-induced situation. Virginia had been trending blue for a while, really since the early 2000s. Again, I think one of the big warning signs for Republicans in the Virginia suburbs was Fairfax County flipping from 2000 to 2004, despite Bush getting a similar margin in the state of Virginia. Fairfax County went to Bush extremely narrowly back in 2000, and of course in 2004, Kerry won Fairfax County by around 8 points, and of course now Fairfax County is safe blue. I mean, you have Democrats winning here routinely by around 30, 35 points, and in some cases nearing 40 percentage points when you have the presidential elections concerned. So, Republicans can't be losing places like Fairfax by that much in order to win statewide. Again, Glenn Youngkin only lost Fairfax County by 30.5 points. Again, compare that to Trump losing it by nearly 40. So that is a significant difference, especially considering the fact that Fairfax has about 1 in 8 people in all of Virginia. It does make a pretty big deal. And of course, on the Democratic side, you had two incumbents go up together. Louise Lucas, who's very much a progressive Democrat, versus a more moderate Democrat. She ended up beating him by around 6 points. So that's not really surprising. She is the majority leader of the state Senate, but some people thought that race would be sort of competitive because of the fact that you had two incumbents going together. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't. So now we're going to take a look at the general election because it'll give us a sense to how Republicans need to do, how Democrats need to do in order to win the House of Delegates and the state Senate. We'll start off with the state Senate because this is currently under Democratic control. These are new maps, by the way. I don't have in front of me who currently serves in these maps, but so far the Virginia State Senate is 22-18 Democrat. So Democrats currently control this chamber. In order for Youngkin to get some of his major policies put through, Republicans need to be able to flip the state Senate because, again, they're at a deficit now. When Jen Kiggins won the congressional race in Virginia 2nd, there was a special election to replace her, and Democrats won that pretty handedly, mostly due to low turnout, but it was also sort of, I guess, a lingering backlash to the whole Roe v. Wade being overturned. And in a very suburban state like Virginia, a more moderate state like Virginia, that does have significant sway. Now, you have a couple of the districts that are toss-ups. Really, for Republicans to win the state Senate, they just need to win these toss-up districts. It wouldn't even hurt to win some of the lean blue districts that are obviously within reach. Virginia 29th, that's going to be a bit out of reach. That's a McAuliffe 12 district. Really, none of these state Senate districts are in reach for Republicans that are light blue. So if Republicans want to actually win, they need to win the toss-ups. And all of the toss-ups barring one, are Youngkin districts. District 24 is a Youngkin plus 4 district. You've got Virginia 31, that's a Youngkin plus like 0.6. And then you've got District 30, which is actually a McAuliffe plus 3 district. So Republicans need these 2 seats, and they also need to be able to flip District 30 or potentially District 22, which now is a McAuliffe district. I actually missed this one when I was covering the other districts earlier, but this is probably the only district that is somewhat realistic for Republicans to even win, and it all depends on turnout. Depends on how much sway Youngkin actually has, because Glenn Youngkin is very popular at this time. You know, he's up, I think the latest poll had him 24 points up in terms of approval. So Youngkin is popular in the state. The real challenge for Republicans is getting that popularity to trickle down to the other candidates. When we go to the House of Delegates map, Republicans control the House of Delegates currently 52-48. So Democrats really only need 2 seats, 2 pickups, in order to make a tie in the House of Delegates in this case. And, you know, obviously that's going to stall the Youngkin agenda. So if we take a look at the House of Delegates map, you'll notice right away there's a lot more competitive districts. A lot of these are centered in and around Nova, the Richmond suburbs, and Hampton Roads. Those are the big population centers, and of course those are areas where Republicans need to do very well if they want to actually be able to hold on to the House of Delegates. So you've got a toss-up district here. This is a Youngkin plus 3. Republicans really should be winning there. Out of the Loudoun County districts, all of these blue districts are pretty much safe McAuliffe. You've got one that's McAuliffe 11. That's not really going to flip. And all of the districts in Fairfax are pretty much safe for the Democrats. We got to move on down a little bit to the Fredericksburg area. This is probably the district that Tara Durant vacated. This is a Youngkin plus 3. In and around the Richmond area, you've got a Youngkin plus 3, McAuliffe plus 5, Youngkin plus 2. So all of these districts are incredibly close. Obviously, Republicans are slightly favored in the Youngkin districts. Now, one silver lining for the GOP, I think, in these races is that you don't have any statewide offices up for election. So this should be lower turnout than 2021, but that could be a double-edged sword because Democrats are also probably going to be energized to turn out, especially if you have this specter of abortion being banned in Virginia being run on TV ads all across the state, because obviously that's a massive motivator for Democrats, as we saw in the midterms last year. So really, for Republicans to actually be able to win both these chambers, they need to stay on message. They need to tie themselves to Glenn Youngkin, focus on the kitchen table issues, don't talk about abortion. That's a major losing issue in Virginia and really most states as of right now. I mean, even states like Kansas and Kentucky, the pro-life ballot measures failed. So these are not issues you want to be talking about in these competitive races. Obviously, in the primary, you want to state your position on those things. But when you come to the general election, keep it focused on issues that Republicans do well on, the economy and crime. And that actually brings me to the Commonwealth's attorney races that we had in Northern Virginia, because in all of these races, the tough-on-crime Democrats lost. In Fairfax County, you had Ed Nuttall, I believe his name is. He lost as sort of a tough-on-crime prosecutor. And then in Loudoun County, you had the current Commonwealth's attorney who was sort of involved in that Loudoun County assault case that got a lot of headlines right before the governor's election back in 2021. She held on 55-45. So Democrats are putting up, in my opinion, weaker candidates in the general election. And, you know, out of these Commonwealth's attorney races, I think only one is competitive. It would be Loudoun County's. And again, even for that to happen, you would need Democrats to cross over, because Loudoun County, even during Youngkin's victory, was still Democrat plus 11. So this is still a blue county, a pretty blue county. But if any of these Commonwealth's attorney races are going to flip, it's probably going to be Loudoun County's. Fairfax County and, of course, Arlington are not going to flip. But, you know, these are issues where Republicans can win. Talk about crime, talk about inflation, talk about taxes and other economic issues. Avoid abortion. Don't really talk about that because that's a losing issue. And, of course, Democrats are going to seize on Republicans having the more unpopular position in this case. So, you know, as of right now, both of these chambers really are a toss-up. We don't really have a lot of polling or data yet in the general election. It really depends how these candidates are running their campaigns. What Youngkin's impact is going to be, and ultimately how popular Youngkin is by November of 2023. Because again, you could have some independents and even Democrats who like Glenn Youngkin, think he's doing a good job, but are still going to vote Democrat because they are Democrat or Democratic-leaning voters. So Youngkin is going to have to persuade those people that in order to get his agenda passed, he needs to have a Republican legislature. Of course, something like that could springboard his career nationally, because if these primaries showed anything, it shows that Youngkin's brand works in Virginia. And the real question going forward is for Glenn Youngkin anyway, if he decides to go national. And of course, if the Republicans lose both chambers, I don't think that's going to happen. But if Republicans win both chambers, this can really propel Glenn Youngkin to a presidential bid in 2028. And I think it shows that he's popular within the party with all factions of the base. And that's what makes him such a formidable challenger to any Democrat who would potentially run against him in 2028. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.